Physical media as we know it is slowly beginning to die. As someone born in 2008 and grew up in the early 2010s, I can confidently say that stuff like DVDs and Blu-rays were a really big part of my childhood growing up. It's not like I have memories of Blockbuster or anything, I'm not that old, but I do have memories of watching all of the bonus features of my Toy Story 3 DVD back to back. Oh, and just watching movies on DVD in general. I always did like them more than Blu-ray. I'm not sure why, it's probably just circumstance, but when I was a kid, all the movies I had on Blu-ray never really had a lot of cool bonus features on them. While my DVD copies of Cars and Toy Story 3 had a bunch of cool stuff on it, Cars 2 didn't really come with anything. Granted, it is Cars 2, but that's not the point of the video. Point is, I have a big place in my heart for physical media. I may love the convenience of digital, I won't lie about that, but physical is, well, it just hits different, you know? Are you telling me you don't like reading the back of your game case as you drive back home from the store? Are you saying you don't want to see your games organized nice and neat on a shelf? I won't lie and say I just buy physical. I definitely do buy digital if I know there's a game that I want on me at all times. Ace Attorney Investigations. Objection! But still, it's sad to see physical media have to go. Not just for games, but for movies, music, and other stuff in general. It honestly feels like they're being rushed out the door. I can't help but feel like by moving on, we're really losing something here. In the case of games, you get to lose the experience of trading them out with your friends. Except for that new feature shown off by Nintendo, but we'll get to Nintendo. And in the case of movies, sure you get online storefronts or streaming services, but all you really get there is the movie. You don't get to have any of the fun little bonus features they'd pack into the DVD, and I know I mentioned those a lot already, but they really were the best part of having them. And for music? Well, I was actually never too big into music. You guys still use cassette tapes, right? Hey, I'm MoonieMuses, and today, I'm going to tell you about the death of media ownership. And to kick things off, let's start with one of the elephants in the room, streaming services. So, Netflix. Let's play a quick game here. If I told you to guess the reason why Netflix was named, well, Netflix, what reason would you give me? Now, I have no way of knowing for sure, but if I had to guess, you probably said something like, "Oh, that's easy. Flix is a name for films, and you can watch them on the internet." And, you know, you're not inherently wrong, and you know, in terms of today, I don't blame you for coming to that conclusion. But it's also not the entire truth. You see, back in the day, Netflix actually used to be a physical media rental-based service. Yeah, that's right. One of the biggest spearheaders in the business strategy that would go on to kill physical media was built off the back of physical media. Pretty cool, huh? The way it worked was simple. You check out a movie that you want to watch on the internet, and then they'll send it to you via physical disc in the mail. It was like Blockbuster, which is funny to say because Blockbuster also would eventually adopt the system via Blockbuster Total Access, so I guess Blockbuster was like Netflix? Depends how you spin it, really. What's a Blockbuster? Oh, shoot. Forgot. I'm a nerd, so even if I'm young, I know what that is, but you may not. What's something a bit more recent? Redbox. It was like Redbox, except online instead of going to a kiosk. I'm pretty sure as a kid I used to think that Netflix and Redbox were the same thing actually, because they were both red and both ended in X and both let me watch movies. That was fun. I'm gonna be honest, I have no idea what a Redbox is either. Oh, frick, you don't know Redbox either. Oh my god. Point is, it was a rental service, meant to serve as an alternative to owning movies, or a complementary to it. A way for you to experience movies that you don't have, but only for a limited time. And by that logic, it's pretty good. But this wasn't enough for them. They didn't just want to compete with a Blockbuster, Netflix wanted to beat Blockbuster. And everybody else, but Blockbuster was the big one. So, they took a risk and did something new. What's more convenient than having movies mailed to your house? Having the movies already in your house. And so, the Netflix streaming service that we all know and love, hate, tolerate? Yeah, tolerate. And so began the Netflix streaming service that we all know and tolerate today. But remember, Netflix at the start was never meant to replace physical media. It was built off physical media, a great alternative to owning movies for a limited time. And the streaming service, despite cutting out the middleman of actual physical stuff, still holds that philosophy. You are paying, in a certain amount of time, for the ability to watch a catalog of movies in that stretch of time. Does it matter if you watch it every day or once a week or even less? You are paying upfront for the ability to possibly use it, and once that time frame you paid for is done, you have to pay again. Like I said, in theory and general practice, it ain't bad. But it's like trying to compare a first aid kit to an actual hospital. Streaming services, like a first aid kit, have a purpose to fill and it does it well. But it can't replace the hospital, or in this case, physical ownership, or just ownership in general actually. Because in terms of actual stability, Netflix and streaming services in general are completely terrible at it. Like, think about it this way. Say, for example, that you wanted to watch Iron Man Armored Adventures. It will tell me that I can't watch it because I'm in America. So, even if Netflix does have it, they're not distributing it in my country. But that's also not true because they used to distribute it here. I used to watch it as a kid, and it got removed in 2015. Same thing could be said about Phineas and Ferb. That show isn't even available on Netflix at all, anywhere. But it used to be. In fact, just searching up Phineas and Ferb Netflix will give you the results of the old Netflix pages. They still appear, and sometimes even load the actual original description. You just can't go to the page at all. Sure, you can mitigate some of this problem using VPNs. But no amount of VPN is going to bring back Phineas and Ferb to Netflix. And that's basically how streaming works. You're paying for a certain catalog, but you have no say on what goes in or out of that catalog. Sure, you can watch The Dark Knight on Netflix right now, but in a few years, after this video is a little older, will you still be able to do so? It might still be true in 1 year, maybe 2 years, but will it be true in 3 years? 4 years? 5 years? How long will we have to wait until the statement of, you can watch the Batman Nolan trilogy on Netflix becomes dated? I don't know. You don't know. The only people that do know is Netflix. And they're not gonna let us know until they slap leaving soon or something on the movie. Compare that to if you own The Dark Knight on DVD, Blu-ray, or heck even digital, but we'll get to digital in a moment. The DVD is like $5, the Blu-ray is like $9, multi-format is like $14. And sure, that's about the same price as a Netflix subscription, but at the very least here, it's your movie. Higher-ups can't take this from you. It's your property, you purchased it, you have a receipt. You are legally entitled to this movie because you paid for this copy. So as long as you just don't lose it or break it, you will own The Dark Knight on Blu-ray until you sell it or something like that. It's on you, it's your choice, and your ownership. Nowadays, the basic Netflix subscription is about $17.99 for standard, or $7.99 for standard with ads. That second price in particular is super interesting to me. I can't help but feel like I've seen it before. I just can't quite put my finger on what it is. Take a look at this chart that I found while looking around the internet for this video. Do you notice anything interesting? This chart is basically a breakdown of Netflix's different tiers and prices for those tiers over the last couple of years, starting in 2011 and ending in 2025. Back then, there was only one tier of Netflix, which was Basic for $7.99. 2 years later, in 2013, they would add Standard and Premium, which would be the main 3 tiers of Netflix for a long time, at least until 2023, because in 2023, they actually fizzled out Basic and instead replaced it with Standard with ads. Except, do you notice something about the price of it? Look, it starts off as $6.99, which is generally cheaper than what Basic ended at, with $9.99 there, except by 2025, it's gone up to $7.99. It's basically the same price as what Basic used to be, except now you have to watch it with ads, when before, there were none. Does that not sit right for anybody else? But, to give Netflix the benefit of the doubt, we do need to account for inflation, so let's be nice and give Netflix this comparison. Comparing the current price of Standard with ads to the original Basic plan from 2011, inflation gives us this. Oh, you know what? That's not actually as bad as I thought. Maybe I am overthinking it. Maybe these Netflix prices are more reasonable than I thought. Let's check on the other tiers, shall we? Okay, so if we adjust the original price of Standard, $9.99 in 2013, to inflation of today, we would get this. Oh no. What about Premium? If you adjust the original price of Premium to what you would be paying today, you would be paying about the same money you're paying for Standard right now. I take back what I said about the prices. Hey, Editor Mooney here. Quick thing to add before we move on, but I was surfing on Google earlier today and I found this interesting article about The Dark Knight on Netflix. So, I guess that's my point proven. I didn't plan this, I'd swear. I just picked The Dark Knight because I like Batman. But hey, the timing couldn't be better, right? I'm vindicated. So, sorry to all those who missed out on The Dark Knight if they haven't watched it yet on Netflix, if it's still there when the video comes out. But I told you so. Or does it count as an I told you so if I don't know if this video will be out in time? I guess I did record it beforehand, so I told you so. Back on track though, I did say we would talk about Nintendo, so let's get talking about Nintendo. What's there to say about Nintendo? I grew up with them, they have some of my favorite games of all time. I just wish that they were a lot better at preserving those games. Oh, and Switch 2 game cards, or I guess now they're calling them game keys. Yeah, these are terrible. But one issue at a time. Had I been doing this a few years earlier, maybe half a decade or so earlier, and made this video, I'd probably be a lot more positive when it comes to Nintendo and their media preservation. Because at the time, they had Nintendo Virtual Console, and while it wasn't perfect, obviously licensed games and certain things would have to be left in the dust, but it was still really good. Nintendo was basically allowing you a first-party way to be able to get these old games again. Paper Mario on the N64, Metroid Fusion for the Game Boy Advance, even as recently as the DS if you owned a Wii U. Could you just emulate them? Sure. Yeah, you can totally emulate Super Mario Bros. 3 if you really wanted to. But point is, this was still a good option to have for people who didn't want to do that for some reason. But again, still was not perfect. For example, Super Nintendo games on the 3DS consoles were locked behind the new versions, despite the fact that it's perfectly capable of running Super Nintendo games. Although, not anymore, of course. Which brings us finally into my actual point here. Nintendo is very wishy-washy when it comes to their media preservation. Sometimes it's good, like Virtual Console, but other times it's not good, like Super Mario 3D All-Stars or Mario 35. Why exactly were these a timed release? I don't know, it's not like they completely remade Mario 64, Galaxy, and Midshine. These are pretty much just mid-effort ports at best. They're good games, and Sunshine is there, but now you can't buy them for the Switch without being scalped. So you're really just better off playing them on emulation. Except no, because emulation is bad, and we all know Nintendo hates emulation. Except it's situations like this that make emulation more appealing, and also just makes everything really questionable. Because think about it like this. I want to play Super Mario Galaxy. Now I have Super Mario 3D All-Stars, so I can play Super Mario Galaxy whenever I want. But imagine, for example, that I didn't get Super Mario 3D All-Stars and missed out on its release. In that scenario, I want to play Super Mario Galaxy, but you're not letting me buy Super Mario Galaxy from you. So what now? I can either emulate or buy secondhand, and either way, Nintendo is not giving me the game anyway. If I run it on Dolphin, they don't lose any money because they're not letting me buy it anymore. And if I buy it secondhand, they're not gonna lose any money because they're not letting me buy it anymore. Now let me be clear, I'm not trying to promote piracy on this channel, but what I am promoting is media preservation. We have to preserve media and allow people to still be able to own it and use it, or else it'll be lost. And while a few games may have been able to evacuate the console and move elsewhere, like Box Boy, which made it to Switch, not every game is so lucky. Liberation Maiden literally never got a physical release. Rhythm Heaven Megamix was never released physically in North America. And sure, you can play the Switch Rhythm Heaven, but if you want to play this one in particular, you can't. At least in America, because you can't import a physical copy from other regions because the 3DS is region locked. So you're going to have to modify your console anyway. Kirby Blowout Blast, Dr. Mario Mystery Cure. Sure, you can brush it off and say these aren't exactly big hitter games or anything, but the point is that these are still games that are lost and you can't get now without having to step on a few toes by hacking. Why? Because a lot of these titles are digital only. So while digital is really convenient right now, there is a very good chance that digital only games will become very inconvenient in the future, because you're going to have a harder time of accessing these things. At least if Nintendo gets their way, of course. You know, it's funny, because they say they hate emulation, but the way they're going right now seems to eventually mean that there will be a lot more of it in the future. What am I talking about? Let's talk about it. The main two things that made me want to make this video in the first place. The Nintendo Switch 2 Game Key Cards. Now, according to Nintendo, Game Key Cards are an alternative to regular game cards that don't actually have the game on the card and will have you download it via the internet when you put the card in. Believe it or not, this is actually already a feature on regular Switch, and I've experienced it, and I can tell you about it. Though I don't call them Game Key Cards, I call them by a much more straightforward name. I call it Lazy Development. So this hunk of plastic is Batman Arkham Trilogy for the Nintendo Switch. And yeah, I know, this is like the second time I mentioned Batman, but I have a point here, I promise. You might notice that on the box, there's this very interesting little blurb on the front and back talking about how you need internet and an SD card to play this game. Which is interesting because it's not like any of the Arkham games have any online functionality, at least aside from Origins, which isn't even in this collection, though it probably would have been a better choice than literal Arkham Knight, But completely disregarding the fact that the Switch port of Arkham Knight is quite possibly one of the worst Switch ports I've ever played, despite me loving the game and putting hours into it, especially after my PS5 killed itself. But you want to know what these little blurbs actually mean? It means that when you put this game into your Switch for the first time, you will be forced to download Arkham City and Arkham Knight off of the Nintendo eShop. Yes, this physical release game is making you utilize the eShop for downloads anyway. So the only thing you can play out of the box immediately is Arkham Asylum, which isn't even really true because you have to download a small update anyway, but the game is at least on the card, which is more than what I can say for the other two. You want to know what's even funnier? If I don't have the game card inside the system, I still can't play Arkham City and Arkham Knight, despite the fact that I had to download them onto the console anyway. It's not like Sonic Mania Plus, where if I remove the game card, it suddenly doesn't have the game data. The game data is right here. I watched it download and I clicked download. So what is stopping me from using my downloaded versions of those games? It's not on the card, and yet I have to put the card in anyway, even if the only thing on that card is Asylum. At this point, this card is literally only A, Asylum, and B, an actual key to get me to play the other two games. It quite literally is just a game key. And based on how Nintendo's talking about Switch 2 game keys, this whole Arkham Trilogy example of mine is probably going to be a good scenario of this. Because at least Arkham Trilogy had one of the trilogy on the card, even if you had to download the rest. But what if Donkey Kong Bonanza or Metroid Prime 4 are released purely on game keys? There's no, oh, at least one of them was on the cartridge here. It is one game, so it might be very likely that there won't be anything on that card. At least not anything you can play out of the box. Again, purely speculation on my end based on my personal experience with something similar to what Nintendo is talking about, because Switch 2 isn't out yet. But surely you see where my issue is here. Imagine for a second that you are a game collector. You like having physical games, you like having them on your shelf, the whole shebang. Oh, and credit to Melody and Surname for providing me this image of her collection.
Hello.
Thanks for this, Mel. But anyway, imagine you're in the future and want to collect Switch 2 and Switch 2 game. Maybe you want to relive part of your childhood, maybe you want to give them off to your kids or whatever, or maybe you just want them, I don't know. But imagine you want to collect them regardless. Let's also imagine that at this point, Nintendo has shut off online capabilities for the Switch and Switch 2 and moved on to whatever comes next. What happens when it turns out that a game that you want to play has only been released physically via the game key method? Remember, according to Nintendo's website, the game itself is not on the cartridge. It doesn't say not all of it, it says the game itself, which implies the entire game is not there. Extreme example, I know, but we'll just roll with it because Nintendo said so. So if the game itself is not on this cartridge when you put it in, because all it's going to do is make you download it, what is it going to download when there is nothing to download? When the servers are down and there's no more eShop Switch support? Is there just no more game anymore? You bought this thing so late, so you don't get to play it anymore, even if you have it now? Can this really still be considered physical media if the media is not on the physical thing? This is just digital media, but you took away what made it convenient, not having to switch carts. You also just took away why people like physical media, which is the security of owning the dang thing in your hands. This way of doing things takes away both good things about both other option and gives you another option that is literally just both bad things. Now, you still have to juggle physical carts if you want to change your game, but you also don't even really own that game, because that card is not your game. Now, to be fair, most first-party games like Donkey Kong Bonanza and Metroid Prime 4, which I mentioned earlier, have been shown to be game card games. Game cards will still be an option and a thing for Switch 2 for certain games, like these first-party ones. I just used these two as an example earlier because they're games that people really care about and are looking forward to right now. However, I still think my point stands, because Nintendo is promoting a way of making physical games where you don't put the game on the physical media. If this trend gets larger and continues, there is a good chance it could lead to what I was talking about, even outside of Nintendo. After all, Sony and PlayStation released a $700 PS5 that doesn't have a disk drive on it and you have to buy it separately. An industry standard suddenly got treated like it was an accessory. And if that doesn't say that physical games are probably going to be on their way out, I don't know what does. And it's not like it would be out of left field either. Services like Netflix have already conditioned us to be okay with not owning media that we consume because we prefer convenience overall. And again, these services are good if you treat them as alternatives, but if you treat them as replacements, then they're bad. And that seems to be the way things are going. Like, back to Nintendo again, Switch Online has classic games, but you don't own any of these games. These are catalogs, but you get to access momentarily for as long as your credit card does not decline. Is this where we really want to go? A potential future where all we have are subscriptions and physical media that isn't even real? And it isn't just media either, you know? It might even be our actual stuff. Like the Switch 2, where Nintendo has the right to break it now, apparently, if you try to do anything with it, even though you bought it and it's your property now. If physical media does die, then so does our opportunity to physically own them. We will buy games and we will not have the right to actually have them. We will go back and try to play these games years later, and we may not even be able to. But hey, like I said, it's so far away. Years later. This is all hypothetical. The Switch 2, as of recording this, isn't even out yet. I should just sit down. Don't worry about it. Just chillax. It's not a big deal, right? But let me just say this. I may not even be right, since I'm hypothesizing about the future. This video may be the worst age thing I've ever made, or it might age well. Really depends. But I still think what I talked about here is worth considering. Because at the end of the day, these are corporations. They are not our friends. They don't care about consumers. They care about making the most money from consumers. But hey, it's still far off. But if you ask me, the moment that a consumer conforms to a way that puts them under the corporation, you lose. Game over.